Okay, so this is section 3 of A Rose for Emily. She was sick for a long time. When we saw her again, her hair was cut short, making her look like a girl, with a vague resemblance to those angels in colored church windows, sort of tragic and serene. The town had just let the contracts for paving the sidewalks, and in the summer, after her father's death, they began the work. The construction company came with workers and mules and machinery, and a foreman named Homer Barron, a Yankee, a big, dark, ready man with big voice and eyes lighter than his face. The little boys would follow in groups to hear him curse at the workers, and the workers singing in time to the rise and fall of picks. Pretty soon he knew everybody in town. Whenever you heard a lot of laughing anywhere about the square, Homer Barron would be in the center of the group. Presently, we began to see him and Miss Emily on Sunday afternoons driving in the yellow-wheeled buggy and the matched team of horses from the stable. At first, we were glad that Miss Emily would have an interest because the ladies all said, of course, a Grierson would not think seriously of a northerner, a day laborer. But there were still others, older people, who said that even grief could not cause a real lady to forget her noble obligations. They just said, poor Emily, her kinsfolk should come to her. She had some relatives in Alabama, but years ago her father had fallen out with them over the estate of old Lady Wyatt, the crazy woman, and there was no communication between the two families. They had not even been represented at the funeral. And as soon as the old people said, poor Emily, the whispering began. Do you suppose it's really so? They said to one another. Of course it is. What else could? This behind their hands, rustling of craned silk and satin behind curtains closed upon the sun of Sunday afternoon as the thin, swift clop-clop of the match team passed. Poor Emily. She carried her head high enough, even when we believed that she was falling. It was as if she demanded more than ever the recognition of her dignity as the last Grierson, as if it had wanted a touch of earthiness to reaffirm her imperviousness, like when she bought the rat poison, the arsenic. That was over a year after they had begun to say poor Emily, and while the two female cousins were visiting her. I want some poison, she said to the druggist. She was over 30 then, still a slight woman, though thinner than usual, with cold, haughty black eyes and a face, the flesh of which was strained across the temples and about the eye sockets, as you imagine a lighthouse keeper's face ought to look. I want some poison, she said. Yes, Miss Emily, what kind? For rats and such, I'd recommend. I want the best you have. I don't care what kind. The druggist named several. They'll kill anything up to an elephant. But what you want is arsenic, Miss Emily said. Is that a good one? Is arsenic? Yes, ma'am. But what you want, I want arsenic. The druggist looked down at her. She looked back at him, her face like a strained flag. Why, of course, the druggist said, if that's what you want. But the law requires you to tell what you are going to use it for. Miss Emily just stared at him, her head tilted back in order to look him eye for eye, until he looked away and went and got the arsenic and wrapped it up. The delivery boy brought her the package. The druggist didn't come back. When she opened the package at home, there was written on the box, under the skull and bones, 4 rats. All right, so the first thing that you guys are going to have to do is the definition of the words and the context clues using the context clues. So those words have already been put in bold throughout this section. So we have vague, resemblance, serene, noble, obligations, kinsfolk, rustling, recognition, dignity, reaffirm, and imperviousness. So like in the past where you guys have done context clues, what I want you to do is just to try to figure those words out using the passage itself. Try not to resort to the dictionary or some online application with a dictionary. If you must, go ahead. But like I said, please try to use context clues instead. For the last part of this section, you have the questions. So the first question deals with what happened to Emily right after her father's death. That question, or the answer to that question, you can find right up in the beginning of this section here. Question number 2. What begins to happen in the town soon after Emily's father's death? So after Emily's father dies, there are some changes happening in the town. And you can find that in the second paragraph here. Question number 3, who is Homer Barron? So Homer Barron is somebody who now jumps into this story. That is a question that you can answer by going back to that first page of this section. There's not really necessarily a specific area, but because he's talked about quite often. But if you want to look at it at face value, this is where you would find it. But then just keep in mind that the discussion of Homer Barron, or the author's descriptions of Homer Barron and how he knows Miss Emily, that is throughout this section here, and his importance as well. What concerns do the townspeople have? So this is concerns that would speak to concerns about her herself, and concerns about this individual, Homer Barron, and how he is getting to know Miss Emily and their relationship that's forming. So that is one that you're going to have to look a little more deeply into in that section. So number 6 is based off of number 5. And you probably have an idea of how the townspeople are if you've read the first 2 sections. If you could characterize them in general as a whole, and explain your response. So what would lead you to believe, or what would lead you to characterize the townspeople as such? For number 7 is what is foreshadowed in this section. Remember, foreshadowing is when the author drops some hints about what might happen in the future. So that is one that I'm not going to give you any help on, because I want you to go back in and try to figure out what is being hinted at. So once you answer question number 7, then go on to question number 8, where you explain that foreshadowing. So if, for instance, you think that what is being foreshadowed is that Miss Emily is going to be married, then in number 8, you would explain why you think that. Maybe provide some direct textual evidence or refer specifically to something in the text. Okay, so that is it for section number 3. And if you have any questions, once again, email me or comment on Google Classroom.